September 15th, 1944. A workshop in occupied Denmark. A resistance fighter slides a crude metal tube from beneath a floorboard, clicks a box magazine into place, and chambers a round with a metallic snap that sounds nothing like the refined weapons of military propaganda films. The gun weighs barely 3 kilograms. It cost less than a bottle of decent whiskey to manufacture. Its official designation is STEN Mark II, though the Germans who've been hunting it for 3 years have another name for it: Untergrundgewehr, the underground gun. Within seconds, this anonymous piece of stamped metal will spray 9mm rounds through a checkpoint, and the soldiers who fall will die wondering how Britain managed to arm half of occupied Europe with what appears to be assembled from plumbing supplies. They will never know that by war's end, their own desperate command will order exact copies to be made in the dying factories of the Reich, a final admission that British engineering pragmatism had defeated German precision craftsmanship. This is the story of how the ugliest gun of the Second World War became the most copied weapon in history. By 1940, Britain faced a problem that threatened the very existence of organised resistance to Nazi Germany. The evacuation from Dunkirk had saved 338,000 men, but abandoned 68,000 tons of equipment on French beaches, including nearly 500,000 rifles and thousands of Bren guns. The entire British Army possessed fewer than 200,000 serviceable weapons. Conventional manufacturing could produce perhaps 10,000 rifles monthly, using skilled machinists, expensive machinery, and hundreds of hours per weapon. At this rate, re-equipping would take years Britain did not have. Worse still, the government needed to arm not just regular forces, but also the newly formed Home Guard, Special Operations Executive, agents preparing to deploy into occupied territory, and resistance movements across Europe, who required weapons simple enough to use after a 5-minute briefing in a barn. Traditional submachine guns like the Thompson cost £50 per unit and required over 200 machined parts. The Lanchester, Britain's existing submachine gun, demanded 85 hours of skilled labour. The mathematics were brutal. Britain needed hundreds of thousands of weapons immediately, and the industrial capacity to produce them properly simply did not exist. The solution emerged from the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield Lock, where 2 designers named Harold Turpin and George Lanchester, later joined by Major Reginald Shepherd, examined the problem from an entirely different perspective. Rather than asking how to make a good submachine gun cheaply, they asked what was the absolute minimum gun that could still reliably kill. The answer was the STEN, an acronym drawn from the first letters of their surnames and Enfield. The weapon they designed was revolutionary precisely because it looks like it should not work. The entire gun consisted of 47 parts, fewer than some modern door locks. The receiver was a simple steel tube. The barrel shroud was stamped sheet metal. The stock was a skeletal metal tube with a crude metal plate for a buttstock. Most shockingly, the magazine fed from the side rather than underneath, using modified German MP-38 magazines because Britain lacked time to design new ones. The whole assembly weighed 3.2 kilograms and measured just 762 millimeters with the stock extended. It could be manufactured by semi-skilled workers in bicycle factories, automotive plants, and engineering workshops never designed for weapons production. Each gun required approximately 5 hours of labour and cost £2.10, roughly equivalent to a week's wages for a factory worker. The mechanical operation was elegant in its brutality. A simple blowback mechanism where the bolt's mass and a spring were the only things preventing the gun from destroying itself. When fired, the expanding gases drove the bolt backwards against spring pressure, ejecting the spent case and chambering a fresh round on the return stroke. There were no gas systems, no complex locking mechanisms, no parts that required precision beyond what a competent metal worker could achieve with basic tools. The cyclic rate was approximately 550 rounds per minute. Controllable because the gun's crude construction actually damped some of the violence of full automatic fire. Production began in June 1941 at multiple facilities, including the Royal Ordnance Factory at Faizakali and numerous subcontracted workshops. By 1942, output exceeded 20,000 units weekly. The British government never released exact production figures during the war, but post-war assessments suggest over 4 million STEN guns were manufactured between 1941 and 1945, making it the second most produced submachine gun of the conflict after the Soviet PPSH-41. The weapon's simplicity meant it could be mass-produced under conditions impossible for conventional firearms. Components were manufactured in dispersed workshops, then assembled in different locations, making the supply chain nearly impossible for German intelligence to disrupt completely. If you're finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Operational deployment revealed both the weapon's brilliance and its limitations. Across occupied Europe, resistance fighters received STEN guns dropped in cylindrical containers from low-flying aircraft. In France, the Maquis used them in countless ambushes along rural roads. In Poland, the Armia Krajowa deployed them during the Warsaw Uprising. In Denmark, resistance cells attacked German installations with weapons that could be hidden inside a long coat. The STEN's greatest advantage was its disposability. After an operation, fighters could discard the weapon without significant loss, or bury it until needed again. The gun's crude appearance had psychological effects the designers never intended. German soldiers found it unnerving that such improvised-looking weapons could be so effective, whilst resistance fighters gained confidence from the weapon's very simplicity. Anyone could maintain it, and battlefield captures of German 9mm ammunition meant resupply from the enemy's own stocks. However, operational reports also documented serious problems. The side-mounted magazine was vulnerable to damage that caused jams. The weapon sometimes fired when dropped or struck sharply. Quality control varied wildly between production facilities. Some units loved them, others considered them barely controllable death traps. The truth lay somewhere between: a fundamentally sound weapon manufactured to wildly varying standards under wartime pressure. The Germans noticed. By 1943, intelligence reports reaching Berlin detailed extensive STEN use across occupied territories. The weapon appeared in captured resistance caches with disturbing frequency. What alarmed German ordnance experts was not the gun's sophistication, but its accessibility. The Wehrmacht possessed excellent submachine guns, the MP-38 and MP-40, beautifully machined weapons representing the pinnacle of pre-war German engineering, but each required expensive materials, skilled labour, and functioning industrial infrastructure, all increasingly scarce as Allied bombing intensified. The STEN represented something different, proof that modern weapons could be produced by nations with their backs against the wall, using minimal resources and distributed manufacturing that bombing could not eliminate. In late 1944, as Germany's situation became desperate, the order went out: copy the British gun. The result was designated Gerrit Potsdam, later redesignated MP 3008. German engineers at the Mauser and Blohm and Voss works created what was essentially a STEN with German furniture and a vertical magazine feed like the MP-40. Between January and April 1945, approximately 10,000 units were manufactured in underground factories and workshops, but the copies revealed why the British weapon succeeded where the German version failed. The Germans could not resist adding complexity. The MP-3008 incorporated a bolt hold-open device, improved safety mechanisms, and attempted refinements that increased manufacturing time and cost. More crucially, by the time production began, Germany's industrial infrastructure was collapsing. The distributed manufacturing model that worked for Britain required a functioning logistics system to distribute components and assembled weapons. Germany in 1945 had neither the time nor the transportation network to make the system work. The STEN succeeded because Britain implemented it when implementation was still possible. American examination of both weapons revealed instructive comparisons. The United States produced its own simplified submachine gun, the M3 grease gun, beginning in 1943. Like the C-10, it used stamped parts and simple construction, costing approximately $20 compared to the Thompson's $200. However, the M3 represented American manufacturing philosophy: simplified but still precise, cheaper but not crude. It used welding and stamping extensively, but maintained close tolerances. The STEN was more radical, accepting roughness where it did not affect function. Post-war testing showed the M3 had better reliability and ergonomics, but required more sophisticated tooling to manufacture. The STEN's genius was that it could be made by people who had never built guns before, in facilities never designed for the purpose, and it would usually work. The weapon's legacy extended far beyond 1945. The STEN's design influenced post-war submachine guns worldwide. The Israeli Uzi, though more sophisticated, followed the STEN's philosophy of simplicity and stamped construction. The Sterling submachine gun, which replaced the STEN in British service, was essentially a refined version, incorporating lessons learned. More ominously, the STEN demonstrated that effective military weapons could be produced by insurgent groups with minimal industrial capacity. Throughout the Cold War and beyond, STEN-inspired weapons appeared in conflicts worldwide, manufactured in improvised workshops from Pakistan to Northern Ireland. The design's extreme simplicity made it impossible to suppress. The technical specifications told the story in stark numbers: 47 parts versus the Thompson's 209, 5 hours of labour versus 85 for the Lanchester, £2.50 versus £50 for conventional weapons. These figures represented more than cost efficiency. They represented a fundamental shift in military manufacturing philosophy that recognised that wars are won not by the best weapons, but by adequate weapons in sufficient quantity. September 15th, 1944. A Danish workshop. A resistance fighter holds a gun that costs less than a decent meal to manufacture. It is ugly, crude, and looks as though it might fall apart if handled roughly. But when the trigger is pulled, 9mm rounds cycle through the chamber at 550 per minute, and German soldiers die in exactly the same way they would die from expensive, beautifully made weapons. The gun will be discarded within hours, buried in a Copenhagen garden until liberation, when it will be dug up and handed to British officers as a souvenir. By then, in underground German factories, desperate copies are being assembled from stamped parts, a final testament to the weapon's effectiveness. The Germans copied it because it worked. They failed because copying a weapon is simple. Copying the circumstances that allow its production is impossible. The STEN was never the best submachine gun of the Second World War, but it was precisely the gun Britain needed when it needed it most: cheap, simple, deadly, and producible in quantities that turned the mathematics of rearmament from impossible to merely difficult. In warfare, that is often the only innovation that matters.